Wealth Show, your go-to show on how to use real estate investing and entrepreneurship to travel the world and live your dream freaking life. I'm your host, Olivia Tati, an ex-engineer turned entrepreneur, dreamer, and full-time Wanderlust here. Here, we are all about abundance and mindset to show you how this thing called life doesn't have to be hard. So stick around and watch your life unfold. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Wanderlust Wealth Show. We have Theoni here today. She is a phenomenal, literally the youngest lender that I've ever met in my life, which is amazing. So I'm so excited to dig into that, but just a phenomenal mom, business owner, and I cannot wait to dig into more of your story. Welcome, Theoni.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited for our conversation today.
This is fabulous. So why don't you at least tell the listeners here, who is Theoni? Before the business, before the lending, where did your story start?
Yeah. I mean, if we're taking it real back, and this is a big part of me, I was actually born in Albania. So I grew up with immigrant parents. And so my entire life, I just always saw the behind the scenes of just working really hard. And as I got older, I realized that in order to make it anymore, it's not the working hard part, it's the working smart part. And so for me, when I grew up, I saw the entrepreneurial things that my parents did, and they own businesses as well too. And so I knew I was always going to be in the entrepreneurial world, and I just never knew that it was going to lead me here. But through my parents being entrepreneurs themselves and owning a restaurant is how I even landed this job that I now have with mortgage banking. I was working as a bartender after freshman year of college, and at their restaurant, and some guy from a bank was like, "We need a social media girl for the summer. Do you mind doing it?" And I had no idea what mortgage banking was. So I tried it out for the summer, and I tweaked a lot of things because the traditional way of how loan officers and real estate agents are known to be successful is a lot of cold calling. And I saw the great depths of social media. So I'm a huge marketing girly, and obviously also love the financing world.
That's awesome. So your parents actually owned a restaurant before that. How was that growing up in that environment?
So they did that. They started that when I was in high school. So I was a little bit older.
Okay.
Prior to that, they owned a piece of Dish Network. So they worked with satellite dishes and things like that. And then before that, when we first came here, I'm pretty sure my parents I barely saw them. They were just working odd jobs just to, pay for rent and get their foot in the door with the American dream and all that fun stuff. So I kind of grew up not with one type of field that I saw. My sister, on the other hand, I have two younger ones, and the youngest, they opened up the restaurant when she was 4. So for her, she's learned a lot of social skills and how to talk because she's now 14. And, 10 years ago when the restaurant opened, she was so little. But for me, it's not so much it's hectic, crazy. It's figuring out the chaos. And I think that is the biggest asset that I learned from them is your life is going to be chaotic in one way or another, especially if you go the entrepreneur route. Yep. So how do you make sense of it, and how do you navigate through that chaos instead of trying to avoid it? So that's kind of what I learned from them doing so many different things as I was growing up.
Totally. And so, I love that you're also, my family's from Angola, so West Africa, so also immigrant parents. And I find that other people who kind of grow up in the same way do have this sort of resiliency. And I think a lot of that comes from, the way that at least my parents, they grew up in the war, right? They grew up in the middle and the thick of it, and they very much taught us survival skills. So there's almost this resiliency that's we got to be out there surviving. And it's so interesting now where, I would say I grew up in a very cushy life, right? In sense that my parents weren't wealthy in any way, shape, or form. We literally were extremely poor and, lived in council housing, but we weren't having to go through war. Right. Didn't have to think about all of that. So that's kind of changed the idea of the American dream for me than it did for my parents. I guess, is that similar to what you've experienced too?
Yeah. So I think that, just like you said, I think it puts everything into perspective. Do you ever go back to visit?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I know for me, when we go back to visit in Albania has beaches and stuff like that. And so when we go back, there'll be times that it's 2 p.m. or 7 p.m. and the lights just go out in the whole city.
Yep.
And when I was growing up and things like that happened, it made me reflect on, oh my gosh, this doesn't happen in America. And like you don't think about those like little things until they happen. Also, my toddler's upstairs screaming because I'm a mom and this is my life. So sorry about that for anybody who is listening who can hear him. But I definitely think it does give a different perspective. And then the other side of it, I think, is like, what does success really mean for you? Because people think of success as a form of like having the Lamborghini and the house and the car and like the money. But I think for me, it's like being able to give time back to my parents that thought that all they had to do was like work forever and then they finally got to retire. And so it's like reverse engineering that to give them the time back because they already did so much of the sacrifice. So I wouldn't probably think of success that way as like retiring my parents almost if I didn't grow up seeing all the time they put into just like building what they have.
Completely. And I absolutely love that because I know for me, like one of my big goals is to be able to take my whole family on an all expenses paid trip. And, because they literally gave everything, their entire lives to me and my brother. And that's like just something that I cherish so much and want to be able to give back to them. So that's so interesting that you kind of have like that similar mentality. I love that.
Yeah.
So you said you started in lending at 18. How was
Yes.
that? Because people don't really,
Crazy.
18-year-olds don't really go into lending.
No. Yeah. So I mean, like I said, I started as a social media, and so all I had to do was like post a couple times on their Facebook site and stuff like that. But I realized like I didn't know what I was helping them market. Like I
Mhm.
didn't understand. Like I was like, I'm making these like generic Canva posts about, oh, we're, if you want to buy a house, come to us. But I'm like, what do you guys do? Like, what is it that you do? And so I was actually probably 19 because I guess I was going into sophomore year, but I was still, pretty young. And before I went to my sophomore year of college, when you work for a bank, it's a little bit different than other lending institutions. So you're automatically just licensed in all 50 states when you work for the bank, so long as you complete, like educational courses. So they just gave me a company laptop and they were like, you're just going to be an assistant to these three lenders at the bank. And so my learning was really like it went hand in hand with what I went to school for, which was economics and business at the time. So it was really awesome to like sit in the classroom and learn about the bond market and the stocks and like how money moves with banks and stuff. And then literally go to like a sales meeting with the bank I was working with at the time. And then they talk about like real life data, where are the interest rates, what are the trends of the consumer. And it was just really, it was a lot because there was a lot that, I was learning at the same time, but also like working there.
Mhm.
But I think that that's what sparked this. I almost want to say like annoyance or like I was almost upset at our education system at the time
Yep.
because I was going to school to learn the ins and outs of the economy and the market, but no one was teaching you like go get a credit card so you can buy a house.
Right.
Or, hey, when you get married, it's two income households. Make sure that you buy like the house first and then get the cars that you like because it's a lot easier to do that than, vice versa. And so that's where I think my social media presence came into play was because I was in school learning about the economy, but I realized that everybody around me wasn't learning how to even buy a house, which is the biggest asset you're going to own.
Yeah, it's also just pretty incredible because even people who have like economics majors or business majors, they still don't get those basic life economy skills that we should all be taught. And I think, especially folks that do go into real estate in any way, shape, or form, a lot of that is kind of like a giving back in terms of education because there's so much
Right.
that just wasn't taught in school that should have been,
Mm-hmm.
that was way more important than differential equations.
Exactly. Right. And I think that that's just kind of a trend amongst a lot of fields is you kind of have to get your hands a little bit dirty in some realm. And that's so awesome that we live in a digital era where like we can teach ourselves. Like if I was probably to go back and tell myself one piece of advice, it would honestly probably be to like not go to college
Yeah.
and just get into this field and just do the work and mess up a bunch and then like learn online because online is really where we can learn those tactics and actual skills that can be applied.
Totally. And that's what I tell a lot of, because I have a lot of students who come to me and they want to, get their MBA. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, if you want to use it as a networking tool, then sure. But there's
Yeah.
also a lot of other like free ways to do that and way cheaper ways to do that too. Because really in school, you don't like learn as much as you would if you were actually to go out there and do the thing. So I guess
Exactly.
that job that you had, was it a paid internship or was it like pro bono work, or how did that work?
Yeah, it was. I was paid. It wasn't an internship. I was like an employee.
Oh, okay.
It was called a banker assistant. So
Mm,
my job was to essentially, I worked for two bankers at the time. One was in Atlanta and one was in Maryland. And so when they would get a file to come in, I would reach out to the client and I would say, hey, we need your pay stubs and your documents and this and that and the other. And then I would set them up on like email drips so that they knew about what's to come in the process. Usually, like when you buy a house, it's 30 days that you're working with people, give or take. So in that process, we want to make sure that the consumer was like notified. So I got to learn a lot of like, what if they expect this, and this is what I should expect, when I buy a house, or this is like, I learned a lot, like literally just doing it and not
yep.
knowing what I was doing at the time. But I was 100%, I was just like, I don't know, probably like $19 an hour or something
Yeah.
like that. But it was cool because it allowed me to see like the flexibility. They didn't care about the hours I worked. They care about the work that I did that week. So long as I did the work and I set up the emails and I contacted the client whenever that was, they didn't care that it was early in the morning or before my classes or in the afternoon or anything like that. So that was really interesting because I always thought hourly meant like you're working in at 9 and you're checking out at 5.
Yep. No, yeah. And, I love that you actually went to go get a useful kind of, a more useful job in college. Cause I remember for me, like, I just worked the front desk at the language center, literally did nothing, did straight
I
up
mean, I was also a
zero.
tour guide.
Yeah,
I did that
exactly.
too.
Which is, fun and like you don't do anything, whatever. But,
Right.
there are those other, especially if you're working for another entrepreneur, you can learn so many skills. Like, yeah, you may not be getting paid a ton, but those skills are going to take you so freaking far later in life,
Absolutely.
especially when you're looking to build your own business, create your own life, whatever that looks like. So I always
Yeah.
like try to recommend to anyone who's like still in college or in high school, it's like try and find those jobs that aren't just like working at McDonald's or working at the, front desk, just sitting there not really doing anything, and something that's actually
Yeah.
going to teach you life skills.
Right. I couldn't agree more. I think that taught me more about organization more than anything because these people who I was working with had such an organized way of doing business that when I started working with them, I just plugged right in.
Yeah.
And that to me was like so eye opening because I didn't have to create systems for these people. They were already created. So then when I became full time commission, which was actually only like 2.5 years ago, it was pretty recent that I went full time, 100%, like no salary, anything like that. I've implemented a lot of those same business tactics and business systems that I learned when I was a sophomore in college from these other loan officers because I saw that it's duplicatable and it's scalable. Like I can just hire someone else and they can flow right into my system. And I think I learned, like, I didn't even know that existed, right? At 19, you don't think about systems in your business and SOPs and, stuff like that. But I did. I learned a lot that I still don't know if I would have ever encountered if I hadn't had that experience.
No, that I feel that to my core because even like the first couple of businesses I started, I've done so many like different things, random things throughout the years. I had zero systems in place, had no idea what I was doing. And so funny, if you now look at my business, like everything is organized and documented, but it's like I wouldn't have known to do that if I hadn't kind of like failed doing all of these other things first.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And being like, okay with, failing. And that could be like probably an entire podcast too. But I used to always see these guys fail or upset people all the time. And I was like, I guess that's just part of it. Like, you can't avoid it. It goes back to the chaos that my parents, try to teach me. Like, you can't avoid it. You just have to work through it. And that's why you get paid usually the big bucks is because you know how to navigate those things in such a high stress environment.
Yeah, no, completely. So I guess, you learned a lot from them, but what were some of the big issues you were seeing in the way that they were running their business? Maybe it was from a marketing and social media standpoint, or if it was from something else. Like, what are some things that you kind of saw and changed up?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest thing is probably the marketing and the social media piece of it because they had so much knowledge that I almost felt like they were gatekeeping it for anybody who wasn't working with them or like their potential clients who didn't even know they existed. And so when I introduced the idea of, well, hey, instead of, because it's very common in this field for lenders to pay for things for real estate agents, because they believe that like real estate agents feed the lender. And so I hated that because I never wanted to go to lunch with someone and be like, I'll pay for your Zillow leads if you give me XYZ, a month of leads. And so I always like would pitch to them, hey, how about we do things a little bit differently and try to go directly to the consumers so that we don't need, not that we don't need the real estate agent, but we're not like relying on them to bring us business. And that was crazy to them because their entire careers, they had always just sucked up to the real estate agent, and the real estate agent gave them business, and that's how they were able to feed their families and, live their lives. And so for me, I knew it was going to be something like almost revolutionary or just really disruptive in the industry when I did start to do that, because after I graduated, I was handed a list of, I think it was like 25 or 30 agents in the area I was in Baltimore, that were doing some serious numbers. And I was told to cold call them, and try to get coffee dates with them. And that was the last thing I wanted to do as a 20-year-old. I didn't want a 50-year-old real estate agent to have coffee with me. Like, what am I supposed to, like, what am I going to tell you? I don't even want to work with you.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I thought that was really outdated, but it was just like, there's old mindset and then old people. And these two loan officers I was working with at the time, one was an old person with an old mindset, but one was relatively new, but just stubborn with the old mindset of how this is just how we have to do things. And this is what's worked before for me. So I'm just going to keep doing this because anything else would be crazy and it would take too long to figure out to see success.
Completely. And I feel like entrepreneurs are really created out of frustration, right? It's like you're frustrated with your current environment and the way that things are being done. And you're like, nope, screw this. I'm going to do it my way.
100%. That couldn't be more true. And as a stubborn, like little college graduate, I didn't have the numbers that these loan officers were doing back then to be like, well, I'm closing 1 million loans a year. Like,
Right.
listen to me. So for me to like really stick to my guts, I'm going to say it really did take a long time to start seeing leads come in from social and real estate agents being drawn to me from social media. And so I knew then, like, I'm so in the thick of it already. I have to prove these people wrong, basically, that this way will work. It just takes time because no one else is doing it. So there isn't a tried or true method yet because it's new, right? It's disruptive. It's not the old way of banking anymore, which is exactly my tagline of not your daddy's lender for that reason, because I don't do things the old way.
I also freaking love your tagline. It's so good. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So I guess, I know you are able to do some creative loan strategies. What are some creative loan strategies that you see working right now in the market?
Yeah, I think that the biggest one, I've had so many creators and so many influencers specifically use this one just in the last 6 months, is our 12-month bank statement program. So as things get more savvy and as people start to come up in like the social media realm and the influencer realm and the content creation realm, there's not really like a business structure for them. They have a ton of cash, but they don't have the history of the tax returns, or they want to use all the write-offs because they're in their first or second year of business and they don't want to declare all that income. And without doing that, you can't show that you make enough. So the 12-month bank statement is just so awesome because you usually have the 10 or 15% down required because, like I said, it's a lot of cash flow with all these different businesses. And you only need 12 months of your business bank statements to show the deposits. And that's how we calculate your average income over how the 12 months of your average deposits. So it's a really cool product because it gets people in the door. And then as long as you can live in there for a couple of years, you figure out your taxes, you can either do it a conventional way the next time, or you can keep rinsing and repeating.
So you can actually use it multiple times.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, that's a great little product. I know some
Mm-hmm.
people will be super interested in that. And then I remember the last time I talked to you, you also talked about, there's a way for you guys to kind of offer cash, like offers basically, but
Yeah.
it's not really a cash offer. Can you explain that a little bit more too?
Yes. So this is kind of twofold. It is a little bit more on the conventional side of things, I will say. So if you already own a house and you are wanting to buy your next house, a lot of people are scared with how competitive the market is right now, and they don't want to offer a offer on a house and say, well, I have to sell my house first because your offer is not going to be very desirable to the seller. And so we have a product that turns that into cash. And so essentially we buy the next property for you. and then you would list your home on the market. And then whenever you close on your house, you just take out the loan on the back end for the house that you already live in, basically the new house that you like. So that's if you already own a house. The second part of that is the cash offer program. So if you are a conventional buyer, if you're approved with a conventional loan, or if you're approved with a VA loan, so my veterans, active duty military, people of that nature, you can put a deposit up front. It's usually around 4% to do this. And that's 100% refundable once you close on the loan. And essentially what that is offering cash for the house. So the bank I work with now, Annie Mac Mortgage, hired a private equity firm to be able to do this. So the private equity firm, should anything go wrong with your loan, will still buy that house in cash in 20 days or whatever the closing date was set to be. So the seller gets the okay and the assurance, like, I'm going to make this much money in 20 days, whether it's going to be from, this from Olivia or it's going to be from the bank. And so that's been a really cool product, because as we're seeing the market heat up like crazy,
Yeah.
and offers going into houses, like one house, I think last week that my client just put an offer and had 48 offers in hand.
Yep.
So like, how are you supposed to compete with 48 offers if it's not cash, which
Oh,
like cash is
totally.
king, So those products are awesome. And for VA and veteran too, in our realm, they're thought of to be like loans that are harder to close. So the sellers won't accept them, which I think is really messed up, because these are people who have served for our country. So like, for them to be able to help them, and if they're a first time home buyer, to turn their offers into cash and make them more desirable for the sellers to accept, is just like, it makes me want to cry like almost every time. It makes me feel so good.
Yeah, I love. Does that also work for FHA loans too, or no?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, no. And that's only because of it's the risk that we're taking,
Yeah.
essentially, to be able to front up all that cash. And so in order to do that, it's the credit score thing.
Totally. That makes sense. Okay, so what are you actually doing in social media that you feel like has, set you apart in comparison to other lenders?
I think that I talk a lot about the struggles that people face. Everybody has this avatar that they're trying to talk to, or like their like ideal consumer. And so I've shifted from that about 7 months ago now to a pain point. And the person's pain point that I'm after is someone who is usually like just struggling and really frustrated about getting their offers accepted, or just the service that they're getting
Mm-hmm.
with buying a house. And a lot of times we see, as markets change, lenders want to make things more confusing because they just want you to close and they want to get paid and move on to the next. And so I've kind of catered it towards, I'm not the cheapest out there. And I'm going to be honest, because nobody ever talks about lender fees,
Right.
but I'm not the cheapest because I actually get you in a house. I'm not going to prioritize the interest rate being the lowest and then not have a team of people behind me that can get you closed and have a great experience. And so just talking about that and being honest and talking to that specific pain point made me realize that a lot more people prioritize the service and don't care as much about the cost.
Yep.
Not that like I'm the most expensive in the world either, but I've figured out that like just being transparent, and especially on social media, like I get lenders and realtors all the time in my DMs, like, why would you tell people that? Why would you talk about that? And I'm like, it's awesome, because by the time that client comes to me, I'm not here justifying my worth or my value, because they
Completely.
already know what I've been doing from my content.
Well, yeah, you've built that trust, and
Mm-hmm.
it's honestly crazy to me because I feel like it's the same thing in like law, engineering, and lending. A lot of these like hyper masculine, it's like almost just a way to confuse you to make like other people seem more inferior, when it's just like most things, number one, actually aren't that complicated. Like we can all understand pretty much everything in this world, including quantum physics, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like figuring out how to distill it in a way that everyone actually understands so that you can like bring everyone along with you. You know?
Exactly. And I saw a quote. I'm actually a part of this mastermind that the majority are real estate agents and lenders who are the top in the country. And it's so interesting because they always say the people at the top are collaborating and the people at the bottom are competing. And
Yep.
so if I want to be at the top, then I have to get as close to collaborating. And that sometimes means, with other lenders, with other real estate agents. And for sure, it means collaborating with people who are going to use my services and kind of letting them into the secrets that everybody has held on to for many, many years in this industry.
Complete. And the thing is like there really is so much freaking business to go around. There really
100%.
is. And it's just learning how to distinguish yourself. But like there's so much. It's never oh well, this person's my competition. Like, no. Like,
No,
oh
no.
my gosh. I also, it's so funny too, because I remember when I got my real estate license at the beginning of my whole real estate journey, like 4 years ago now, which is pretty freaking wild. I don't really sell
Wow.
anymore though. I just refer. But I remember at the time, like I didn't have a bunch of people I could just reach out to that were ready to go buy a home. I also just went to social media, and I used to do this thing called Tati Tour Thursdays where I'd go in and do like tours of homes. Cause I was like, I don't want to go to open houses. That sounds horrible. Like, I don't want to just like sit there and smile fakely at people coming in through the door who weren't actually going to buy a house. Like, let's just do social media. And that was how I got most of my clients at the time, even though I was working part time. But like, social media has so much reach as well. And it's so funny because I even like yesterday had a call with a new student who she'd been following me for years, right? And had just been following me since my days where I was doing those tours. And that's why she trusted me to join the coaching
Wow.
program, right? Was because she'd been following me throughout this entire time. And that's why I'm like, y'all, post everything on social media. You never know who's
Yeah.
watching and what's going to happen later down the line.
That's so funny. I used to have these things called Theoni's Thursday things,
Oh my
and
gosh.
it was literally it was me talking about the process of buying a house, and they're still on my IGTV,
Oh
which is
my
like
gosh.
cringy to even think about. And I have left them there because I love going back to see like where I started. Like you said, you don't
Yep.
know who's following along in your journey. And I'm sure maybe in a year somebody's going to reach out or something and be like, I've been here since the Theoni's Thursday things.
I love that. Well, and it's also just like, you know, some people will go through and delete their like old posts because it's cringy, but I love seeing the
I love it.
journey, like
Hmm.
it's so incredible also then to go back and like pull up what you were doing before compared to where you're doing now. Cause sometimes we can kind of get in our heads and be like, oh gosh, I'm not doing enough. Like, this is really hard. And then you look back at how far you've come and you're like, okay, wait, just kidding.
Absolutely. I was just actually on a podcast. So I'm on this podcast tour. So I'm trying to get on like as many as I can. I was
Yes.
just one the end of last week. And she asked like what a piece of advice would be if I could give myself some when I was younger. And I was like to probably slow down and like appreciate some stuff because I've been in a rush to like get to where I am. And now I feel like I'm in a rush to get to where I'm going to be when I'm like 35. And so you're right. Like those pieces of content really remind you, hey, you've come way farther than like most 27-year-olds, and not to compare, but even to compare to your old self. And so I think that that's such a good message for everybody is like slow down and just like realize where you are and that you used to like hope for days like this.
Totally. And so I guess I have a couple questions for you here. It's like, where are you trying to get to at 35? Because you're 27 right now. Where are you trying to get
Hmm.
to by 35? And then also, what has made you, in your eyes, super successful so far?
Yeah. So I think my biggest goal right now is I'm really, really close to a point where like my loan business is starting to be a little bit more self-sufficient. I'm getting a couple more hires this week. So I never want to be 100% out of that because I genuinely love helping people through it. And I think that I do have a gift to simplify the home buying process for people. Whether it's the first time, second time, third, but I want to remove myself from like the nitty gritty of it. So like
Yep.
the emails and like the little things, I'm like really good at almost like bringing it in. So I want to make sure that that's totally leveled and then start to go into the world of marketing and personal branding. Cause I also feel like I catch myself and I have caught myself multiple times, either coaching my real estate agents I work with or my team of loan officers I work with, or honestly, just anybody in the industry. And my husband is in marketing as well. And so it just kind of goes hand in hand and he has his own marketing business. So I think to like tap into that side of it is
Yeah.
what I'm really, really hoping to do. And then just kind of gain more time back for the fun part of creating. So like creating with loans is one thing, and then getting out of like the administrative stuff and then creating with the marketing side of things is like my biggest goal is to open that time up for just creativity to flow.
I love that. I also love that you said like you never really want to fully get out of the business, right? Because that's kind of how I feel with a lot of like my real estate stuff is, I created my coaching program. I love my coaching program. I love my real estate investing. I love my interior design stuff. I never want to like fully get out of that business, but I don't
Mhm.
need to be doing all the day to day. So it's like I've finally started hiring people and I'm like, wow, I have so much more
Yeah.
time on my hands. This is amazing. This is running way more smoothly than it was before. And it's incredible how like as business owners you have that ability to hire to help you do life because I feel like and when you especially when you get a W-2 job you just unless they give you people to do the nitty-gritty for you you are responsible for doing it all and you don't have the opportunity to
Yeah,
outsource.
right. I totally agree. And I think it's hard to get to a point. It's like what comes first, right? The chicken or the egg. It's hard to get to a point where you can justify, oh, I need help because I have all these leads. But then you need all the leads to get the help. And so you're like, where is that tipping point? And I don't think it exists. I
Yeah.
think it's just like a full send. And then once you have somebody else or a team of other people, it's not even like the money part of like you having to pay them. It's, well, now you're actually building a business that is going to scale and you kind of have unleashed that beast. And so I think that taps into like a different part of creativity in your mind when you take those risks. And then that's how like you open up doors to other businesses you want to do and be like, okay, well, I'm really good at this piece and this piece can also work in this industry. And you
Yeah.
would never know that if you were in your email all day trying to work on the one.
Yeah. I know. I finally like I have a VA now who does all my emails and it's the best thing ever. She literally took my emails from like 70,000 down to I think we're at 15,000 now and
Oh
she's
my
making her
gosh.
way down and I'm like this is beautiful. My brain is clear.
That's crazy. How many email accounts do you have?
Too many. Way too many. I've got like so that was just one of my emails. She's done two of them so far. I've got one, two, three, four, maybe five, four. I think I've got four right now.
Wow. I
Yeah.
was just talking to my husband about this yesterday because he was saying the same thing. And he was like, I need to get out of my email. And I was like, how many email accounts do you have? He was like, I don't know, 6. And I was like, no one has that many emails. I was like, you need to delete your email accounts.
Yeah, and that's what especially once, now that she's kind of cleared a lot of them out, I'm going to start transitioning things over to just one business email, one personal email. That is it.
Yeah.
No more.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think
Uh,
that the condensing is probably a good idea.
yeah. So tell me, like, what do you think has made you so successful to this point?
I think that I have been able to really adapt and like shift either mindset or tactics really well. When I became a mom, that hit me harder than I ever expected it to. And no one ever prepared you for what life looks like in an entrepreneurial world and in a world that if you don't show up, you don't make money. And so, not having a maternity leave, things like that, I really had to adapt to a new way of doing things. So, like, even taking this call today while I'm sitting here in my house, I would have probably like pooped my pants if you would have told me like 5 years ago that I would have had to be on a call where my toddler was upstairs, like crying, screaming, asking for me because I thought everything had to be perfect. I was very much a perfectionist and I let that go when I became a mom. And I also realized that that is the exact thing that has helped me to bring in more business, be more open minded. And I just do things imperfect. Like I do
Mhm.
this podcast and I'm not in my studio, I'm not in my office, I don't have the best lighting. And it's just like those little things that move the needle, I've realized are much better to do. And it builds character. Like it really does. Like you just become a really tough person doing things imperfect. And then you appreciate those times that things do go your way and things are planned. And you're like, whoa, this is so nice. But I can also do them without all of the things in place.
Completely. I know. I was literally telling someone the other day that I have a calling right now just to learn from more moms because I feel like it does kind of flip everything on its head a little, And there's such a like
100%.
different way that you do business, that you do life, and I'm always in such awe and feel so inspired by what's possible and how you can really still work to design your life the way you want and like know that your priorities are going to shift. And that's a beautiful thing. And that just means you're growing and learning more. And I just, yeah, I'm always in just such awe.
It's it is like literally the hardest job in the world. And to weave all of it together, like I'm so thankful now that I grew up in chaos because I now live in chaos again, like, with my own family. And I always thought when I was younger, like I'm going to have this like grand mansion where everybody's going to have their own playrooms and everyone's going to have their own space and like all this stuff. And I actually ended up buying the house that I'm in now and found out I was pregnant with my husband the night before we closed.
Oh my
So like I
gosh.
should have known then that things were always just going to go sideways for us because this was supposed to be like a starter home, and then we ended up like really loving the area, loving the neighborhood. We just don't love the house because it wasn't supposed to like, have a family, but to navigate and to pivot through all of that instead of I used to get really frustrated with myself and like used to beat myself up and be like you're not in this place because you didn't do this before. And so now just being able to like think differently and say no, there's a reason why I'm doing this podcast and we're sitting here in my dining room instead of in my office. And I don't know why, but that's the mindset shift that I needed, and you learn those things when you can't just focus on, your business. You have to also focus on your mom and your, a little kid is like dependent on you. So it's just been like a really interesting shift that I think a lot of moms still do struggle with because it's hard to make that shift.
Totally. Have you ever considered like getting a W-2 job, or was that like not even remotely on your radar?
I think that I think about it like once a month, like still. I think I really do. I probably say to my husband, like at least once a month, like, screw this. I'm just going to go get like a 9 to 5. And he's like, and not see your kid. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So
Totally.
I've built this like independence and structure around my life where there is kind of no structure because I
Yeah.
have the freedom to do whatever. So, the thought of doing that. And again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think it's just hard once you've like been in it and like going back to my 20-year-old self. I have so many more people to prove wrong that the way that I'm approaching this way of marketing and social media instead of kissing up to realtors
Yeah.
works. And so it would almost like hurt my self-confidence if I personally went back and just got a regular W-2 job.
Totally. Because I guess, what do you feel like is your purpose in life?
I love that question because I think it changes so
Yeah.
often. I think it's to like really empower people to build a brand online because I just see that that is the way of all businesses. And even if you're a restaurant, even if you're a service product based industry, it's like there's no better feeling than knowing that you have the freedom of picking your ideal client and anyone you ever get on the phone with. Like for me, time on the phone is really important because it's time away from my kid. So if I'm going to be on the phone with you, you're going to be a client who's qualified to
Yeah.
like sit here, talk to me, and I'm going to walk you through all this stuff. So I think that it's almost it's like helping people to realize that that's not being selfish. That's just like you at your highest and best use
Yep.
in society. And I think that as women specifically who own businesses, we want to help everybody. And it's like when you start a business, you think of how many people can I help? Like what is the most amount of people? But then changing that to if I'm talking to everyone, I'm talking to no one.
Yep.
And then you can't really help anybody. But it's like it's like gapping that bridge of allowing women to believe like you're allowed to be picky with who your end consumer is because you are best positioned to help them. And so I think
Completely.
that's what like I'm really good at is telling people and showing people and like guiding people through that.
Yeah, no, and it's so true because I remember even when I first started getting into business, and this applies for business, this applies for real estate, is like you cannot cater to everyone. You just cannot. You're gonna piss people off. And even when I think about even designing a home, right? Like you have to pick a specific avatar or a specific type of person that you're designing for. Or if it's social media, you have to talk to a specific person because they're going to resonate with you and they're the ones who are going to be like, yes, that person, she's my person, I want to work with her, or I want to stay there, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. Or even I talk about this a lot, pain points,
Mm-hmm.
because your pain point can be different depending on the person. Like I've noticed that there are still women or men in their 50s that reach out to me, and it's because the pain point that I'm talking to on social media of them not feeling like they're getting the service during their home buying process is not the 26-year-old girl I painted 2 years ago that I thought was my ideal consumer. And actually, if anything, that 26-year-old girl is more reliant on her dad. So she goes to her
Mm-hmm.
dad during the process, and then they shop me like hell and use some random credit union and then never end up closing with me. So it's not even that avatar or person, it's the pain point that I'm after. And
Yeah.
so it's like helping people figure out like what pain points do you really like to fix? Like what are those problems that people have and what are those feelings that they feel that you're really good at coming in and meeting them there and then fixing that.
Okay, I love, love, love that because I have an interior design business and we work a lot of the time with guys, right? And we have to continuously tell them the person who's actually picking, let's say, an Airbnb to stay at is not the boyfriend or the husband. It's 98% the women. Like, and even if
Yes.
it is the boyfriend or the husband, they're probably going to send it to the wife or the girlfriend or whoever and be like, hey, what about this place? So you're not designing for the dude, you're designing for the women. And like, yes, there are certain situations like if you're, designing a bachelor pad where it's specifically only dudes going and there are only dudes going to
Mm-hmm.
be booking, totally fine. But you have to think about that, especially when you are designing places for families or places for couples. Who's the one who's actually going to be booking it? Who's the decision maker there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like you just said, it sometimes it's not, sometimes your avatar starts to shift as you realize, oh wait, I'm actually attracting these people and it's not at all who I want to work with anymore. And
Yeah,
that's okay. You know what I mean? Being like, again, you're not going to help everyone and that's all right. And you're like learning it through your content and through your messaging.
completely. No, I love, 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 love that. That's such good gems there. Okay, so we are closing out here, but I ask everyone three final interview questions. It's the same questions everyone gets. So the first one is, what does your ideal perfect day look like?
Ideal perfect day. I wake up with my toddler probably coming in, with a cup of coffee in bed with him. And we usually listen to French cafe music in the morning.
Oh,
So if the night goes okay, that is how we start. And then come downstairs, read a couple books with him, and then my husband makes breakfast. And then we usually go on a walk. I live 4 miles from the beach. So like on nice days, that is like my perfect day where I'm like, let's go on a walk first. And then not touch my laptop and not open up anything work related until like 10 or 11.
yep.
And then lunch probably on the beach again, because again, I just love that. And then probably creating somewhere in between there, some sort of vlog. I feel like my best days are the days I vlog or day in the lives. And then coming home, making dinner for the family. And then I don't know about you, but I love like a good hour or two at night of work. Like I am
Yeah.
definitely like I'll grab like tea or something at night. Now that I'm pregnant, I can't drink more than one cup of coffee, um but I love to just like crank out an hour or two of work after I get him down, my kiddo down for bed. And that is like, it gives me, I don't even know what, but before I go to bed, I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, my email's cleared and I finished everything.
No, yeah, and I mean, it's like helping you start the next day well, right? Because you're like, okay,
Right.
it's kind of like doing the dishes at night, right? It's like everything's clean, you're going to bed with a clear head.
Exactly. It's literally, I actually do try and do the dishes at night before I go to bed. It's one thing I can control.
I love that. I also love how you talked about, I'm kind of the same where my mornings, I kind of like for them to be clear, to go outside. I try not to work too much in the morning before 10 o'clock. Sometimes before, like today was before 12. I'm just like, I just love my mornings. I'm going to go do my own thing. And then we're going to sit down and get to work.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And I've been trying to operate on like a 4 hour work sprint even too. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that means like all 4 hours of the afternoon and I get the nanny and she'll just hang out with my kid for 4 hours. Or that sometimes means breaking it up in 2 hours during his nap time and then 2 hours at night before I go to bed.
I love that. Okay. Question number 2. What is your mantra?
So I have a couple. I think that one that I say a lot is your goals don't care how you feel.
Mm,
I don't know if that's
yeah.
really a mantra, but like
No,
I
that's
say that all
good.
the time.
Yeah. I guess, can you expand on it a little?
Yeah, so it started when I was actually in my workout journey after I graduated college. I obviously in 2020, I feel like everybody did, but I gained all this weight and I didn't know how, which like now I look at it and I'm like, well, maybe because you sat like a fat potato on the couch. That's probably how. And so I would remember like I needed to go on walks, and I lived so close to the beach. And I would remember saying to myself, like literally out loud, as I'm like tying my shoes to go outside, and I didn't want to go because it was raining or whatever. And I was like, okay, too bad your goal doesn't care how you feel. Like your goal of losing weight doesn't care that you are tired right now or that you've had a long day. And then I started saying it to people that I would either coach for TikTok or my clients sometimes, or my realtor partners. And then I was like, wait a second, this is really good. Like, it's almost like you're going to see delayed gratification, but you need the reminder that that's going to happen, that process needs to happen. So I was like, even if you say it out loud sometimes of, I don't feel like making content, but too bad my goals don't care how I feel. The goals that you have in place just don't care.
I love that. I love that. And that, it just really helps shift your mindset. You're like, okay, yeah, that's fair. That's so true.
Yeah. They don't care that I'm tired.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. What does wealth mean to you?
I think wealth for me is retiring my parents, just like I mentioned earlier, and just having the ability to never let money be a blockage in the decisions I want to make and the opportunities that I want to take on for my life. I never want to think about money being an issue when I say yes to a big opportunity, or if my kid asks for something, or if we need to do something in our lives.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so where can people find you, especially if they want to get in touch about loans, or maybe their lenders who want to get in touch about social media or whatever that looks like?
So I am Theoni the lender on all platforms. So I make it super easy. You can just Google it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Theoni. This was wonderful, and hope you have a lovely day, and I hope your baby stops crying. Thank you so much for listening to Wanderlust Wealth Show. Now, don't forget to follow the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you love this episode, it would literally mean the world to me if you shared this with a friend or a family member, or literally like anyone off of the street. Like right now, go ahead, share it so you don't forget, or post it on social media and make sure to tag me. I love seeing what you're listening in on and what you resonated with, and I'm just so freaking thankful for you. I'm so freaking excited for you. I love you, and don't forget, life really doesn't have to be hard.